Hey everyone, welcome to Arch's Garage, and let's get right to it, right? So in this video, I want to cover basically, well, that's four. No, I want three things. I want to cover like three things in this video. So let me cut to the chase on this. So this is a nice RedMax blower. This is really commercial grade, right? And the customer is just a regular consumer. So he wanted to buy something a little bit better. And we're going to get into that a little bit later about why I think that I think consumers don't really get the benefit out of commercial grade stuff. We'll get into that later. The other thing I want to go through is just a basic diagnostic on this, and I'll kind of walk you through that. And well, you know, we can't get it running again, or I can't get it running again, and the question is why. And I want to show you a bit later on. I'm missing some tools that I really could use. And one tool that I have but is missing a part, and it's missing a little bushing. It's like a fitting to test these smaller engines with these tiny little plugs. And I really need that. Now, that said, I didn't buy one. I want to get a new compression gauge, and I want to show you one that I picked out that I would like to pick up. So we'll talk about tools later and some of the stuff that I think we could use from testing these things. Now, one of the reasons why I just haven't bought it, well, one is because I don't have the money. But the other reason is that I really don't work on machines like this. I don't work on the consumer machines because there's no money in doing it. But that's slowly changing. And I want to talk about that throughout this video and a little bit more towards the end. And that actually ties into a little bit of, well, why is it that consumers really don't benefit from this? So we'll cover those two things. The third thing is the tools. And again, to cut to the chase, is it fell in a pool? Yeah, that's right. It fell in his pool. And I had asked him, I said, well, what happened? You were running it. This model doesn't really have a throttle control. And I said, what was it, on like a wooden deck or something? And you left it running, you went to go do something, and you walked away, and she walked herself off the deck. And he goes, yeah. And I caught it, and it went in about 3/4 of the way, a little bit above the muffler area. It sucked in a lot of water. And then he said, my back was wet for weeks because the padding and the backpack and everything was soaking wet. But he did get it running again. And so therein lies the mystery here. Now, part of this problem with this machine is the price cutoff point. And again, that's something we'll talk about later on. How much time and money do you spend on diagnosing this? So we will get to that. Let's get to the sort of testing and introduction and all of that so you can see what I did to it and what I did go over and some of the simple things that you can do. And a little bit later on, again, we'll talk about some of the tools and stuff that would have helped me out and helped the customer out, but probably wouldn't have changed anything. But it'd be good to have, and I think we should all have, and I need to upgrade my toolkit a bit. And then finally, we'll get into, again, why I think it's just not worth it. Stay tuned. All right, let's see. About mid-throttle. That's open. That's closed. Is that primer on it? Oh, it doesn't like that. That won't start. Yeah. Let's try more throttle. Oh my God, this thing's hard. Hard on your hands. Oh my God. All right, let's dig in. I'll try full throttle. I don't know which way is full throttle. Has to pull out your shoulder. All right, she's done. All right, so initial thoughts, right? You might be thinking from the first little bit of footage is that, oh, it's got a fuel problem, okay? And then it won't run at all. Now, initially when he brought it here, he told me the story. I asked him if he could start it. He put it on the ground. He got it running. It would not develop any RPM. It was choking and blowing smoke. Notice it was blowing some smoke. But notice I already start complaining about how hard it is to pull, and the machine is like ripping out of my hand. And eventually later on, I put it down on the floor, and you'll see this shot where I put my foot on it and it ripped it out from underneath my foot. So consider that as we go into the carburetor phase here. We want to take a look at the carburetor first. We all know that 9 times out of 10, usually it's a carburetor scenario, right? Because the alcohol and everything. But he mixes his own gas. He's even tried True Fuel. And this is a fellow that's handy, right? And he cares. That's why he, as a consumer, he spent that little bit more money to get a better, what he thinks is a better product. And in some ways it is, but later on, again, we'll get into, is it a better product? And how is it a better product? Let's take a look at the carb. The first thing I notice is all of this sticky fuel. See it? And it feels sticky. There's a drip there. Let's look at the plug. Now, I can't compression test it. I forget. It's wet and dirty. I don't have the fitting for these small plugs. Mostly because I don't do a lot of these. I you know, and it almost feels like you're not going to be doing them. You know, because very quickly we're getting away from these. And I just don't do enough. But we'll see. Maybe we'll... She has compression because she ran. And he ran it for a little bit longer. All right, so there's not a lot of... Yeah, let me show you the screen. So we don't need to clean the screen because it's clean. So that's not an issue. It doesn't seem like it has a lot of hours on it. A little dirty. I don't want to take the muffler off. Be careful with that, right? If a bolt breaks, we've ruined it. So we're going to work around that. It would be nice to be able to see the piston. I think we should just work on now getting the carburetor off. There's nothing fancy here, fellas. We're just going to take these bolts out, and I'll bring you in for anything that's remarkable. Right, there is a primer bulb down here, but when I moved, oh, I can feel it. I can feel the air. So when I move this, oh, let me turn the light on. I notice it when I mentioned it to him. It's all deformed, so it's leaking. It's leaking the pressure. You need to put a little pressure in this tank to help the fuel assembly move. So that's what it looks like. We'll take these off. I can get this. It's about $10. I looked it up. This all looks good here. He was like, oh, this is getting a little bit beat. Maybe it ripped off. I'm like, that's not an issue. Okay, that's just part of some crappy barrier. Let me see how I get this off. This should pop off and slip up, and then we can get in there and just remove the cable. Yeah, this little clip here. You just lift that up. She pops off. Then we'll remove this little white piece here and the cable. So I slack the cable, push the throttle down over there, and we'll remove this, and then we'll peel off these guys. Okay, so the black hose goes, I'm standing to, you see where I am? So the black hose just goes here, and the clear hose goes there. We'll figure out which one is which in a minute. Black hose looks like it's the feeder, and the clear hose is the return. And yeah, that mix looks a little thick. All right, let's get in here and take a look. All right, now that the little cap is off, it's just like a lock. Just, let's see if I can grab it. I'm using one hand. So just grab it, twist the throttle, and then lift that cable up. I can't because I'm holding the camera with the other hand. And then that's it. The cable come right out. No issue. All right, here's the gas. And that's way too rich, in my view. And it smells old, like it doesn't smell strong. Especially sitting out over the summer, it's going to evaporate. It doesn't smell strong. There was a little bit of dirt in the bottom. I filtered it, and I caught some of it in my filter. I don't know if you can see, but there's a little bit of dirt down the bottom of that. And I left also a little bit in the container that I dumped into. Generally, I use like 92 octane. It lasts longer. I think, as Exxon says, you lose about an octane point every couple of months or month or so. So the gas, if you're starting with 87 and you have it out for a season and maybe use some gas from the year before, you're going to wind up with just gas that's evaporated. You're going to have a lot of oil in it. And it was smoking, and I mentioned that to him. I was like, you're a little too smoky. Your mix may not be right. These things will not run properly unless you put good gas in them. All right, it's a little dirty. I'm going to give it a wipe down with some solvent, give it a blow before we open it up, and then we'll open it up and I'll bring you back, okay? And everything looks good in here. This actually it looks good. I'm going to see if I can just lift it up carefully. I'm going to use some of my secret sauce on it, which is a 50-50 mix of gasoline and tranny fluid. And I'll see if I can lift it up. I need 2 hands for that. And just to get in there and clean everything out, see, there's not even any dirt on the screen. And I just use my release agent, again, which is a 50-50 mix, and just carefully kind of lift and pry and move it back and forth. All this looks real good. We'll see if we can get this off. Now, this is the other diaphragm, or you don't want gum out on these things, so I'll see if I can get it off. All right, even though it doesn't need it, I'm going to replace some of the soft parts. So you got to be real careful. You see the little nib there? There's a little actuator. Make sure that they're at the right height, like this one here. Some of them are very shallow, some of them are longer, and then of course the bolt pattern. And then we're going to do a new one of these, okay? Even though there's nothing wrong with this, but we'll just put a new one on. Everything else looks good. Like this grommet is in excellent shape, and this is fitting nice and tight. So we're going to trim off, there's plenty of excess. We're just going to trim off the end here, where I found the damage. He's replaced this. I just blew it out with like lower pressure compressed air. When you blow a carburetor, fellas, blow with like an air duster level of compressed air. You can even use like the computer air duster. Not a bad thing, you know, in the can. But this I just went with about 30-40 psi from both sides. You can actually hear there's like a valve or something in there. Anyway, that's not bad, not terrible. We'll put that back. All done. So I blew I blew the one end, then I blew out the other and blew it again. Make sure there's no junk in there, and that the fuel is thick and beat, so we want to get that out. So this was the hose, this is your vent, and to replace it, what we're going to do, okay, just cut a little notch on that. So this is what, I forget what size this is, 3/16 I think it is, but it's the outside diameter you got to look at. They come in a couple of different outside diameters. That fits good there. And if you want, we can put a little bit of lubricant down into that cable. That's a good idea. We'll clean her on there a little bit. We'll clean the plug. I want to check on the gasket. All right, there is a slight difference, but boy, I'll tell you, you sniff it. Ooh, oh yeah, ooh, oh, yeah, mine here. Oh boy, you can't even really. You got to sniff it, because if you tried to breathe that in, you'd know the difference. Whereas this is like, yeah, you really got to breathe it in before you smell anything. So the volatility, it's just not volatile anymore. All right, let me get that in, and we'll check primer bulb. As long as I see fuel pull up and fuel goes into the primer bulb, we should be okay. Let's get outside. All right, so we've covered a whole bunch of things so far, and I wanted to show you the inside of the carburetor and at least include something of the carburetor rebuild, a little bit of that, the setup of the throttle cable and the hoses, because again, 9 times out of 10, that's your problem, and I wanted to include that in there, even if it made this video a little bit longer. I think it was worth it, and because a lot of times it is your problem. That said, I could have left that carburetor the way it was and put it back. He even said to me he has changed the filter a couple of times, because again, he's had it for a number of years and he bought it new. And there was very little dirt in that gas tank, other than the gasoline being a little older. And I showed him that, and he agreed, and he smelled it. And we know that there are some machines that just will reject customer fuel, right? For those of us that are in the know. I like to start off with cleaning all that out and then putting in a known good fuel that I have. And I keep around that nice, at least 92 octane. I run it in my machines. And before we test this thing out, right, this is where we are at this point. We could have just looked at the carburetor, looked at all this, slapped it right back in there, other than the hose, all right, which was a bit leaky. And that should have said at least, all right, we've got a good carburetor. But to take it that one step further just to make sure, because my thinking was, well, listen, if it's really not all that bad, at least the carburetor's done and we can move from here. At least I can rule that out. So let's go test it now, and you'll start to see a little bit something else occur here and develop. All right, primed it. I got a good fuel pull in through the tube. You could see it. You probably can't, but I can see it. We're going to go to choke. And another quick prime. Not much fuel in it, but let's see what happens. No good way to really hold this without the plastic on. Let's see. Throttle, we're going to go about midway on the throttle. Yeah, I know, it's hard. I hate these things. I just don't want to hold it here. It's not a good way to pull it. We really need it on the ground. Oh, let me shove it on the ground. That's better. Now, there's put a little bit of my training sauce in there, in the plug hole, and pulled it over a bunch of times just to try to break up some of that varnish that might be in there. Let's see. Yeah, this thing's hard. That's one of the things I don't like about it. Why is it so hard to pull? You know, it shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, I don't know. There we go. Yeah, she doesn't want to run. Could have damaged it. Let's try it again. Take the choke off. Yeah, it's like she's not getting fuel. Let's try a different position. Yeah, she should run. All right, choke off. Let's go in here. I just pulled the plug, and what I'm seeing is it got wet. So I think it's coming from in here. There's no way in here on these kinds of machines. So there could be a lot of gooby, oily, gross nonsense in there. There's no good way to get that out other than to spin that over. All right, I'm going to check for spark real quick, just by spinning it. Yeah, there's spark. I can smell it. It smells like old oil, and it probably because it is. So my two concerns are this spark. My concern. See, look, there's junk coming out of there already. Look at that. It's in the muffler. We may have to take this muffler off, just from it blowing a little bit. I think we're going to have to take this muffler off. Let me see what I can do. I'm a little bit concerned about that, but I could see it. I just ran my finger over it, and it went black. And that was just from a minute. So the only way we can get the gook in there out, we got to get all this apart again, is to really take the muffler off. And we may even be able to run it without the muffler on. Nope. Yeah, that's what'll happen, fellas. All right. Two-stroke fuel. We'll see if we can loosen it this way. Put a bunch of two-stroke in, spin it. Just spin it like that. All right, now, I like my other tool better because this kicks back. I think it's just all grossed out inside. We're going to leave that cap off. Yeah, there it goes. There's plenty of compression. All right, let me put this back. We're going to put a little lubricant on this, just a bit of oil. Put it back. We're going to leave this off. Put the plug back, and we'll see what happens. All right, a couple of things to consider here in terms of what I'm doing. And my one concern that I'm basically trying to allude to here is that what I've seen is is this kind of oil and gook mixture with varnish can build up inside the crankcase area. And it will ghoul everything up. And it also gets up all on the rings and the piston. It really would have been nice to take out that muffler, but I get it out, but then I risk breaking something like a bolt or whatever. That bolt could strip, spin, break because of, the different ionic exchanges with the similar metals and all that, and the age and the rust and potentially the chlorine. And I'm like, oh my, can we just work around this? And because I don't have the correct fitting for the compression tester, I'm really at a deficit here. But what I'm thinking is, in this point, is that it feels like it's seized, like it's been seizing or it has seized up. And, well, a lot of times we just think it's the mixture that does this because people don't make the mix right. And after talking to him later, I don't think that was the case. But then there's all this goopy stuff. And what it can do is it'll make it really, really hard to pull. Now, these engines can seize for a number of reasons. One of them being overheating, right? The other one is just not, that can come from dirt, not being cleaned properly. And the other reason can be a kind of a seize where it's like a fouling type of seize. There's ash in these two-stroke oils that can build up. So I put some two-stroke in and spun it over, checked the spark again, and we're going to get into that spark tester thing a little bit later on. So it's got spark. So far, it feels like it's pulling a little bit easier, right? Maybe I washed away enough of the gunk. On some of the engines, the cheaper models, you can actually go in from where the pull starter would be and get in there, clean out some of that gook, get it out of there. It will dilute the charge and it will make it almost impossible for the engine to start because notice in the beginning, I noticed some stuff coming out of the muffler. How do you get it out, right? If you can't get in there and get it out, and it will dilute that charge. Now, it can back up and it can get pushed in because that's where the charge goes to lubricate everything down below for it to come up and into the combustion chamber and be burned. And even if you put some ether or whatever in there, it's so diluted that it won't run. So these are my concerns. How is it seizing? What's going on? All we can do is just keep poking away. Let's give it another test and see what happens. All right, throttle should be up. No choke. Yeah, no choke. And let's just pull it and see what it does. All right, nothing. Let's try a little bit of this. We'll lower the throttle a little bit. Yeah, she's dead. There's no kill, and we checked for spark. All right, so the kill is a button over here, and we checked for spark. We had spark. We'll reprime. All right, and we'll give it a pull. Nothing. Let's spill some two-stroke in there. Yeah, that's it. It's just dead, fellas. If you think about it, right, it should fire. So, I'm pissing fluid all over the place. I'll go to about mid-throttle. It should fire on ether. Of all things, right? Yeah, she's done. If it can't fire on ether, let me check the plug again. Let's see. Let me smell it. It feels like it's not even getting fuel. So that could be one of the problems, there might be something in here in the reed valve. Let's give it some fuel. And just thread it down by hand real fast. Yeah, there's nothing else I can do. She's just dead. All right, so she's not running, and it's got some very weird symptomology. Now, of course, having a correct adapter for the compression tool would have really helped out a lot. Typically, I like to see, for any two-stroke, a minimum of 100 pounds. Personally, 120. I got an old Honda Harmony with the Kohler clone motor on it, and it's getting about 140. It's old. To burn oil And, in a two-stroke, remember, these things run at like, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000. I forget. They run huge. They wear much quicker, huge RPMs. But with that extra oil in there and everything, you really want a high-quality fuel, a very fresh fuel, volatile fuel, something with around like at least 91, 92 something octane. Now, octane is not the volatility of the fuel. Octane is anti-knock. But what's associated to anti-knock is a high-quality fuel. Typically, it's a little bit better fuel. And also, it's got that volatility. It's going to be able to give it more power. As it ages, and like I mentioned earlier, I think it was like Exxon, something about, needing it, every month or so, you're going to lose about an octane or whatever it is. Your fuel is evaporating, is what really happens. And with two-stroke, you're left with like an oily yuck. And I'm still thinking, all right, well, we got good fuel in it, right? It feels like it's a little bit seized up. I put the two-stroke in, I spun it over, we retested spark. It did loosen up. Notice how I was pulling a lot easier. It loosened up, but then now there's nothing. There's no kick. So is it compression? Maybe, maybe not. Let's take a look at this compression tool here. And this one is a little bit more expensive, 10-piece, $34. It's not bad. I don't recommend a leak down tester, not for something like this. That's another discussion. I can get into that. We used to use leak down testers to determine the performance level of an engine. And, if you have an issue with a ring or something like that, it can be useful. But it's not really required. This has all of the pieces you would need. And probably these two over here where my cursor is, these two guys over here, they're probably going to be what you would need, maybe even this one here. So I would say like everything you would need. This is what I'm talking about. It's an adapter. So you're threading in the end of this hose into one of these adapters that go into your plug hole. And that would be nice. That's what we really need for some of the Kohler engines. And there's some other engines now coming out with these smaller plugs. So even though I don't really want to do two strokes, I think this would be an advantage. My stuff is getting old. Let's take a look at another one. Now here's one that is a little cheaper. And I think this last bushing here, adapters probably would be all you would need. It's a few less, fewer pieces. But I think for what I do, this might be something that a little too cheap. Might be nice having the extras. Now, another neat thing, too, is they have these pieces here. Both of them have it. They got rubber ends. If you just want to do a quick compression test, you're not looking for an uber seal. Somebody can crank it over. If you can crank over the engine and just hold it there, you could just, determine up, dead cylinder. We're not really looking to see, is the cylinder any good? Or what level of it is it good? We're just looking to see, is the cylinder dead? We got a cylinder dead here. Right. 6-cylinder, 3-cylinder, 4-cylinder, whatever. Now, diesels are different. You're going to have to get one that is a higher pressure rating. That's another story. But this should work for what we need. Now, there's a couple of other possibilities that could be going on here. And remember, this thing saw pool water, even if it for a short period of time. What I'm thinking is perhaps we're having an issue with the spark. It could be that the coil was failing, and then with me fooling around with it, it failed. Because sometimes these things will happen around the same time when you start noodling with it. You force the failure. And it can be confusing because it could be a couple of things that are going on at the same time. Remember, maintenance, age, lack of maintenance. I mean, I get machines that are disasters. So I'm starting from the absolute horror. Here, we're starting a little bit higher up. Let's take a look at one of the testers that I like. Now, here's a tester here. This is by Lyle, and I would not recommend anything from like Amazon on the cheapy side of things. I've seen reviews on some of those. They don't even work. But Lyle was a company that we used to buy on the rack at decent auto parts stores back in the day. It actually has a bulb in here that lights up. And it's not just a spark gap tester. And we're going to look at one of those in a bit. It's actually on sale right now, and I'm actually thinking about buying this. Mine is an old school, and it's like the plastic is burned on the inside. You can't really see anything, and it's a gap style. This might be nice, and it's only $15. So I got one more I want to show you, but before I show you it, and this is just an example of one, but this one here does something a little bit different. Now, sometimes when a coil begins to fail, there is a difference between the demands placed on a coil when you're just testing spark in open air versus under compression. And this motor does feel like it has some compression. Theoretically, if you put a little fuel, take the plug out, dribble a little fuel down it into the plug hole, put the plug back, you just have to be hand tight, or even shove a little bit of ether in, give it a pull. It may not run really well or run up to full RPM or whatever, but it should fart and kick and blow some smoke. And we got none of that. And remember, this coil saw pool water. And remember, he said his back was wet for a while, and then it didn't just come from the padding being soaking wet. It sucked in that chlorinated water and bathed, well, just about everything, but it bathed that coil. And although those coils are, partially electronic, there's a computer brain in there, and then there's a regular coil system, it could just be failing. And you got to take the whole case apart for that. And that's more time and more money. And I would not recommend some crappy aftermarket coil. I would go to Rotary or go to Sten's or wherever and buy a factory coil. There are going to be a lot more money, but I've had some issues with some of these knockoff coils. Remember, there's ignition timing for all of these things, and they may even be a multi-spark discharge. So not just one spark, but it might be several. We don't know what the engineers decided for these engines, and those knockoff coils may not have any of that. And I have an Echo, a beautiful machine that I can't get running, and I spent the money on an aftermarket coil, and I put time into it, and it won't run. And it should. And my thinking is, well, at this point now, I can't buy anything else for it because I can only sell it for about $150. I'm done. Which this leads us into the other story at the end of the video, which we're almost there. Now, what this can do, and again, you can get a better one. I think Echo actually has one that's really nice, but it's a lot more money. As you move this knob outward, you're increasing the space between these two electrodes. And what you're looking to see is first you move it out a little bit and you check for spark, and you keep turning it out, and you're looking to see when you get no spark. And you should have spark, nice thick spark, at around 20 thousandths, 30 thousandths, 40 thousandths, right? And of course, it's not going to be super accurate. So then what you would do is, all right, okay, you've got spark, put the plug back in. This goes between the plug, right? One end goes, into the plug wire on this side, the other end to ground. But you really want to see is with the plug in, you want an inline tester to see if, you put this in line to see if you're getting spark with the spark plug immersed in that compression layer, right? In that compression envelope. It forces the coil to work harder. And if she's breaking down, you want to turn this thing out until you get no spark. And if you can bring it out pretty far and it's consistent, I think between those two kinds of testers, you can determine whether or not you have a potentially faulty coil. Remember, we can't go into that coil yet and test it with an ohm meter. That's another thing, because most of the coil manufacturers, and I have videos on this that do very well, these coil manufacturers will give you baseline ohm meter number, ohm meter style numbers, like in ohms, right? 2,000 ohms, 3,000 ohms. They'll show you A, B, and C on a chart, where to measure it. And then you can look even deeper there and determine whether or not this is an ignition coil issue. And if it is, this would be one way to check it, just to see, get a good feel of it. With these two tools, you can get a pretty good feel of that maybe the coil is failing without doing a lot of work. And now you can, if you decide and the customer lets you, you can break the case apart, and it's going to cost a lot more money, and that coil is not going to be cheap. And then you can take that old coil out, measure it, find the numbers, go online and find it. The manufacturer will have it. You can make your determination there, all right, if you're going to continue with this project and move forward. Keep in mind, this is going to be getting expensive, and this is the problem. And this is, again, also leading up into why I think these machines don't really benefit the average consumer. Stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. All right, fellas. And you might be saying, "Oh, it's just as frustrating. What the hell are you trying to tell us here?" I know it's a lot to take in. And you might be saying, "Arch, how can you do this stuff if you don't have the tools?" Again, fellas, I've even put up some videos recently of like, this is the last two-stroke I'll ever do. I don't like doing these, and I think the days are limited and numbered for some of these machines. I mean, there'll be all these, 7, 10-year-old machines out there that are worthy of fixing. But when I met with him and his wife initially, I said, where is our limit here? Because I got to get at least $25 just to start a diagnostic. It's a very light fee, but it may be a little more than that as a diagnostic fee. And where do we stop? Is it hundreds of dollars? And where do we stop? Okay. And they were thinking about it, and they were like, they weren't comfortable with spending hundreds of dollars necessarily on this. Now, I said, you should go price one of these right now, okay? Because a lot of people are not cognizant of how much things have gone up. And this is what takes me into the final chapter here, where we've covered everything else. There's nothing more I can do to this machine with the tools that I have to determine exactly what's going on, or even to completely rule out certain things. Either way, whatever it is that I found now or may find if I had these tools, it's going to be more money. You're going to blow that case apart. That's going to take time to take that whole case apart, take the blower fan off, right? Because that's where the coil is. It's back behind that blower fan. And you need to get in there and be able to, effect a repair at it. And it's going to cost more time and more money. And so this leads me again into the final chapter. All right, fellas. So where is the price point on all of this? And why do I say it may not be worth it for somebody to buy, a regular consumer to buy one of these? All right, typical scenario is consumer goes to a big box store and buys the cheaper variant of one of these blowers or weed eater things. We'll stay with blowers. This particular blower right now that you see here is anywhere between $600 and $1,000. It really depends upon the model exactly that you're looking at. Again, this model isn't really made anymore because it's an older model, about 7 years old. So they're going to go out and they're going to buy something, and it's, as we all may know, that they're pesky, and if you don't take care of them, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be out $200 in a year, 2 seasons, whatever. And that's not terribly painful, right? Sometimes you can get them even cheaper, around $100. For me to fix something like that, I gotta get them for almost free, because if I put an hour of time in, minimum shop time, I need to make at least $50, and that's like a gift. And then whatever parts, and if it doesn't work, I just wasted an hour and a half. What am I going to make? Even if I buy it for $10. And today, people, they don't want to sell anything or give anything away. They think everything is gold. You go buy like a station wagon from back in my day, and they're asking $6,000 for it. And it's like, are you kidding me? Anyway, so that's what these people are thinking, is I'll just buy another one. And for a while, that's how it's been. Now the prices have gone up considerably on everything, not just blowers. The dollar is crashing, and everything is more expensive. So they're not just feeling the pain. It's not just that a blower doubled in price and is ridiculously expensive. It's that everything. So for us, for now, as mechanics doing this, we're now coming into a season to where if we keep our prices right, we'll have work. Whether or not you make money, that's another story. Margins are very, very thin. Keep that in mind for this type of work. It really is. It's not like automotive work and a Class A mechanic that can, make a really good living and live where I live. Where I live is really expensive. So it's nothing like that. You're at the bottom of the barrel. And if you're dealing with the consumer, it's even worse, because they don't have the money and they won't spend it. And here's why. So a consumer says to themselves, all right, I got a little bit more money, I make a good living, but I want a better machine. And they buy something for about $600 or $700 like this. Well, there's no real value there for them. It's a better machine, yes, a little bit better, but it's not invulnerable. And something like this is revving up so high, it's going to wear out pretty fast. It's not going to be like a lawnmower. It's made to come apart and be repaired. Now, they're not going to do that, okay? They don't have a relationship with a contractor like me, either whether it's the local shop up the block or some side guy like me doing business. They don't have that relationship. We haven't had relationships like that with consumers since I was a kid here on Long Island. It's been a long time. people do not service their machines. They call me up and they go, oh, I just need a tune-up. Does it run? No, it doesn't run. You're probably going to have to replace the carburetor. I'm like, first of all, how do you know I have to replace the carburetor to clean it out? How would you know that? And number two, that's not a tune-up. That's a full service. It's a repair. That costs more money, right? They have no concept of any of this. And so typical scenario is for a shop like mine or the shop on the side of the road, they're working with a contractor who's using it. So the contractor buys it and gets a tax discount, right? Gets some tax relief at the end of the year, and they can amortize that over time. So they get that immediately. And so there's an incentive there for them to do that. The consumer has none of that. Then if they bought it from a shop that's selling a particular brand, even better, right? They're having a relationship, a working relationship, even better. And if they're bringing their other machines in for service, well, they have a continuing relationship. And it may be that the thing burns out around this time of year where all the leaves are falling and they desperately need it. But all this time that they've had it, they've been making money. They get the tax discount, right? And they're making money. The consumer has none of that. Now it breaks and they go to their mechanic who they have this relationship with. The mechanic says, I'm too busy right now, but as you know, I do a lot of this kind of service over the winter. And the contractor says, all right, take it, let me know. It'll be about a month or whatever. And maybe they have to go out and buy another one if they're a small outfit. If they're a growing outfit, they're going to buy another machine. Yes, it's expensive, but they're going to be making money. And for that year, they get a tax break, okay? And then later on in the year or at the beginning of the next season, all right, when they finally get the machine back and they have their spring sort of cleanup to do and the rest of the season to use it, they then get the bill from the mechanic and says, your machine is done. It'll be about $400, maybe $500. That could be a lot of money, sure, but it's half the cost of a new machine. And if it's like this one where the plastics are in good shape and everything else is good, and it's fixed by their competent mechanic that they do work with, which is also tax deductible for that year. So the consumer gets none of these advantages. Yes, the machine is a bit better. It's made to be repaired. Personally, you would be wanting to use factory parts, which are a lot more money. Carburetor for this machine is like a couple $100. Fortunately, it's in good shape, but it's expensive. But you can warranty it. As the repair person, you can warranty this kind of work. If you have a problem out of the box, you can deal with the company that sold it to you. This stuff carries with it support. The consumer has none of that, and long since been. You go over to the box store a month or two later, and it's different people working there, right? So there's no way you can have any personalized experience. They're not used to working with the smaller contractors, or I should say, repair shops. And the smaller repair shops where I am, a few and far between. Nobody has the room to do this. You can't afford to run a small repair operation out there on the street. Rents are too high. Everything is too expensive. So this is all disappearing very quickly, particularly where I am. And for me to just deal with the consumer, I have to draw the line real quick. There's either a little bit of money in it or there's no money in it, and it's wasting my time. Why would I want to buy a tool for something that is going to cost me money at the end of the day and nobody appreciates it? Nobody's going to give me that kind of money, at least up until more recently. And it's going to take time for the average consumer to kind of get the hint. You better go find a repair guy. And by the time they do that, everything will be electric, and people like me will be out of business, largely, because what we do is by volume more than anything else. If you don't make a lot of money and you're selling small things, you've got to sell a lot of small things every day in order to make your money. And once a lot of this work starts to go away or become more scarce, how many lawnmower blades and battery swap outs and cables can you do on an electric lawnmower? That's already a lot of money. How many of those can you do and still stay in business? So that's my dissertation on this, fellas. I don't have anything else. If I add anything else into this, that'll be it. But I think for this video, it's over. And I gave it back to the guy. He's fairly happy. I spent a lot of time with him, talking to him and explaining this stuff. So he got that time for me as well. And maybe I'll get some more work out of it another day. Is it worth it for me? It's not a matter of is it worth it for me to fix this machine. is it worth it to him, and will he pay me for that? And the answer for that right now is, hold on. I don't think I want to spend more money on what is perceived to be a used machine. I did encourage him. He's handy. I said a lot of my videos are about this kind of thing, inspiration for particularly older people that are now retired or retiring. You have some more time on your hands, maybe a little bit of money. You want to save some money. It might be a really good idea to tinker with it. I said, what's the worst that's going to happen? Right? He's like, yeah, it's already broken. I can't make it worse. I said, so take it apart. And I gave him some tips just a little while ago about maybe dealing with the coil, and I'll give him a hand if he wants me to get involved a little bit more. All right? I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching this episode of Archer's Garage. This one's a fail.